Okay, so we're continuing with part 2 of this book called Dress Selection and Design. So, underneath it all, this is the first chapter. We did the intro previously. The body size, relative proportions, and carriage when standing, sitting, or moving inspires the dress designer and establishes the limits within which she may work. She must consider the current ideal with reality. Current ideal of fashion, figure, proportions, and reconcile the ideal with reality. Perhaps this seems a truism, but throughout fashion history, clothing often has ignored or distorted the body. At the turn of the century, boned collars forced women to hold their heads proudly high, and stiff corsets flattened, like here, stiff corsets flattened abdomens and arched spines. Long, clumsy skirts that swept dust and filth from the pavement were worn universally, though derided by the writers of the day. For women fainted dead away. Indeed, the vapors were fashionable, and no lady dared venture out without smelling salts in her reticule. During the Civil War, the tightly laced bodice and the full hoop skirt shown here mercifully hid all kinds of hips and legs. The costume possessed charm and romantic beauty if the waistline could be cinched in tightly enough to contrast with the huge belling skirt. Hoop skirts have furnished inspiration again and again for present-day ball gowns, but handspan waistlines would not be tolerated now as they are too uncomfortable. Portraits of Queen Elizabeth I show an astounding example of a redoubtable woman. Her long pointed whalebone and leather corset, pinched in her wasp waist, and her farthingale, a huge hoop encircling her body below the normal waistline, supported layer upon layer of petticoat, under gown, and over gown, all of rich, heavy fabric. Let's see. We are told that she could not we are told that she could outstand the hardiest ambassadors to her court, and small wonder, for she was literally propped up by her ruffs and stuffs, which could have stood alone. Philip Stubbs, a contemporary chronicler, cries out against the abuses of the times. When they have these goodly robes upon them, women seem to be the smallest part of themselves. Not natural women, but artificial women, because that's what they really are. Not women of flesh and blood, but rather puppets and marmots consisting of rags and clouts compact together. Real beauty was difficult to recognize in clothing that appeared only to smother the body. Although women are emancipated from the extreme discomforts of former fashions, clothes still cause furrowed brows, if it does not allow for body motion. The shape and structure of modern clothes must combine to gain this end. Indeed, uncomfortable and restrictive clothing is ungraceful. Very tight sleeves with too little ease around the girth bind the arms and impede action. A skirt too narrow at the hemline for normal walking, sitting, or climbing is awkward, no matter how beautiful it may appear when the wearer stands still. A bodice should allow room for breathing and will be uncomfortable and unattractive if it draws around the chest. A tight fit overemphasizes a large bosom or cause undue attention to undeveloped flat breasts. Fashion often dictates equally familiar figure distortions. Shoulders are widened and squared by padding at one time, or drop down when fashion demands that shoulders slope. Hips are extended by hoops or flattened by tight girdles. Belts jump from the normal waistline to just beneath the bosom when the empire fashion is in vogue, so higher up. Or plummet to hip level to create a straight up and down shapeless sack look. A quote here from Philip Stubbs' Anatomy of Abuses in 1583. That was about right here. It says here, a dress fitted too tightly is awkward and uncomfortable. A dress that enhances natural lines, motions of a well-proportioned figure always appear graceful. Well, restriction's not always a bad thing. The changes are endless, so some for better, some for worse. And yet, they go on because women want change, and change stimulates sales. Periods that emphasize the natural figure, normal shoulder, high, youthful, rounded bust, natural waistline, and hip line still appear graceful because the figure itself determined the costume silhouette. But that gives more emphasis on the motion rather than the figure itself, in my opinion. So, this should be proof enough that clothing should be adapted to body proportions and motions rather than forcing the body to conform to a fashion designer's notion of a new shape or look. After all, body proportions and movements change little from one century to the next. And to be truly beautiful, costume silhouettes must harmonize with the shape and proportions of the body beneath the clothes. That's just assuming that the body looks a certain way. So if somebody has a certain shape of a body, that same costume is going to look different on them than somebody else who has a different shaped body. So even though they might have do the same exact motion, their bodies are different. They have different shapes, and the more restrictive designed clothing emphasizes this difference based on how the person fits inside. So, fashion figure proportions. Few students are sufficiently aware of figure proportions to sketch a design that reflects the body's beauty. The lay figure given should be copied and its construction practiced by the student until she acquires enough skill to present any costume sketch clearly and proportionately. The relative proportions of each part of the body to the whole will then become familiar. If practice discloses an aptitude for figure drawing, just develop this ability and may open the door to a fashion career. Construction of the human figure is a mechanical process and does not require special drawing talent. 12-inch figure is given because it is easy to divide and it is large enough to allow for some detail. Using the head as the unit of the measurement, the figure is 8 heads tall. So draw a 12-inch line to represent the full height of the figure. Leave space above and below the line. Divide the line in half by marking with a point. Divide the upper half into fourths and thirds. Divide the lower half into 2 equal parts. Mark a point half an inch above the base. Stop to analyze what these vertical divisions represent, and study the diagram on which each division point is labeled. The top quarter of the upper half, 1/8 of the entire length, is the length of the head, which serves as the unit of measurement. The second quarter of the upper half indicates the highest point of the breast. The third quarter falls at the point just below the waist at the hip bone. Next, analyze the upper thirds. The top third marks the shoulder level, and the second third comes just above the waist, the lowest curve of the rib cage. And the waistline is located halfway between the hip bone and the lowest part of the rib cage. Proportions of 8 head fashion figure, vertical divisions. Let's see. It says, so this is, okay, there's a waist right here. Why are the legs so long? Okay, so head, it looks like the person has no neck. So there's a shoulder, then breast point, base of the rib cage, which is the waistline, center, okay. Okay, so the widest hip measure, then the knees, then the ankles, okay. So this is the waist. So it's basically like 4 points or 5 points, including the head, 6 points. So the head, the breast, 7 points. The shoulders, the breast, the waist, the hips, the knees, and the ankles. How many points is that? So it's 7. So the head is 1 head. Then the shoulder is 2. Then the breast is 3. Then the waist is 4. The waistline, which is to me the most important line because it's like half of the body. So then you have the hip, then the knee, and the ankle. So 7 points. The ankle. Should we add the tip of your toes? Maybe. So that's 8. There you go. It says the lower half of the figure is divided into 2 equal parts. The halfway point marks the knee position. The point ½ inch above the base marks the ankle position. These are all the vertical center line divisions you need to identify the main proportions of the trunk and legs. So I'll go over them until they're memorized. Next, consider the width proportions. So the width is this way. So the width, it says, rule a horizontal line across the shoulder, horizontal line of this way. So then you have, what do we have horizontally? I don't know. This way? That's like, okay. Waist level.